Till the morning light. You see the suffering we're going through. I'm finally here. The treasures that we're waiting for. So I gotta keep on climbing, though sometimes we make it hard. But we're gonna stop till we reach the top. No matter what comes my way, I ain't gonna stop now. Even though the strong winds blow, I gotta keep moving on till I make it. Ain't something how God when we go down, how the devil tries to make us think there is no way out. Maybe you lost someone that was close to you. Maybe you're sick and there's nothing you can do. Oh, yeah. Just keep your eyes to the sky when times get hard. Because you just don't see what you cry. Oh, you see, I'm trying. They will last for long. They only make them so you gotta keep on holding on. Up the rough side of the mountains on and high ground. God, I can't turn around. Never gonna turn around. No, I ain't gonna stop now. Even though the storm will strong, well, I can't stop moving on till I reach the pearly gate. It gets hard sometimes, and I don't understand. Sometimes we don't understand. Things don't always go right. Always go the way that I planned. Sometimes we just can't see. We must trust in God and just believe. Gotta keep on climbing, keep on fighting. Everything's gonna be alright. Weeping may endure for the night. Joy comes in the morning light. Good morning. Thank you for joining us late. Not you were late, I was late. I had this grand plan, and when I got ready to log my computer in this morning to the streaming site would not work. And I tried to figure it out and just get it to reboot by itself, but needless to say, it would not. So my only remedy was to shut the entire system down and start up all over again. But here we are, 15 minutes later than expected, but nonetheless, we are here. Uh, Let me talk today about a follow-up of a conversation we were having yesterday about making sure that our offerings, in terms of presenting ourselves in a godly manner, um, is first to God. And when we give God the reverence that He is due, much like Moses did not do in Numbers chapter 20, once we fail to reverence God, then how we handle other people is probably going to be in an irreverent way. So Moses is frustrated. He's grieving. Remember, his sister is dead. Uh, the people are many, multitudes, and now they're chiding Moses because they have no water to drink. Their cattle have no water. And Moses is going to cry out to God. God instructs him in terms of what to do, and he does that. But then Moses, he strikes the rock. God didn't tell him to strike the rock. And he called God's people rebels. Uh, they may have been rebels, but the people, they got what they needed, water. But what we talked about on yesterday is sometimes, although you get the intended results, the attitude of the individual rendering the results will make the results not as sweet, not as pleasant and yet it could be the very thing you need. It's much like the analogy I often use is going to the doctor. And the doctor is there to check you out, give a diagnosis, give a prognosis, render a treatment plan. But how well do you respond to a doctor who comes in, doesn't say hello, doesn't ask how you're doing? They've gotten all of the lab reports back, and they walk in and say, "You're going to die in 10 days." Yeah, you're going to die in 10 days. Well, you came looking for the truth. You came looking for what's going on with you. But did you come to be treated in such a harsh, cold manner, seeking what you were looking for? Uh, no bedside manners. Well, imagine a home with no bedside manners. Imagine working in a working environment, no bedside manners. Imagine in a social setting, and there are no bedside manners. Well, by the time you get to Numbers 20, verses 10, 11, and 12, Moses has no bedside manners. And because of that, God takes away his trip into the promised land. Moses began to communicate to God's people as if they were little children. Now, there are two or three ways of communication, and that's really what I want us to talk about today. Because in Numbers chapter 20, you see a very inappropriate manner in which Moses, who is a grown man, Moses, who is a servant of God, talks to God's people. He's not talking to the little children. He's talking to God's adults. But he's talking to them in a very harsh, a very condescending, as if they are little children. Now, in church, as we come back from March 15th until now, our communication patterns are going to be very important in terms of how we reassimilate into the congregation. There are basically three patterns of communication: a parental pattern, an adult pattern, and a child pattern. Now, you'll understand this very easy. Couples, husbands and wives, a man who is grown, a woman who is grown, a Christian who is grown, mature, another Christian who is an adult and mature. They are not each other's parents, nor are they one another's child. That's important to remember. In a church setting, unless you're dealing with the infants and toddlers, the K through 9-year-olds or whatever it is, but when you step into a young adult class, a college level class, a senior citizens class, an auditorium adult room, keep in mind, we are not each other's parents, nor are we talking to children. Therefore, the only healthy pattern for relational communications is an adult to an adult one. Any other communication pattern, regardless of how it appears to be working, is number one, faulty. Number two, it's harmful. And number three, it is destined to create some form of discord, even in that church relationship. That's true in a marital relationship. That's true in a work environment. In the military, you see that pecking order of seniority, and you hear the the military personnel, sir, yes, sir, sir, yes, sir, so, no, sir, no. That doesn't mean they like it. It means that's what's expected, but it has no indicator of whether or not, whether the Marines, I've learned being in the Washington, D.C. area not to call a Marine a soldier, but all of the other enlisted personnel, they may surrender to it, but that does not mean they appreciate how they are being taught to. So never confuse, well, they do what I say do. They don't talk back. These are grown people. And what we've done many times is move the communication patterns from an adult to a parental one, to where it's more like a parent to a child. Now, what's the difference in the three? A parental communication pattern occurs when the adults who think they're the parents tell one another what to do. And let me give you an illustration of that parental pattern. It might be, you shouldn't, you should know better. Didn't I tell you? You don't need to. Why are you doing that? That's parental talk. And here's what I want you to appreciate. When we return to the church building, if you are in the auditorium, you might notice the children are not in the auditorium. Well, they may be there temporarily. But my bigger story is everybody in the auditorium are adults. When we break our classes out and we go upstairs to Dr. Wutall's young adult class, everyone in that room are adults. In the college students class, those are all adults. So there is no space for that parental form of communication among adults to adults. No space at all. Here's the childlike communication pattern, where the adults are whining and pouting and refusing to engage if they don't get their way. They threaten to leave. They fight for recognition and approval. Doesn't that sound like what children do? My sons are grown, and periodically, especially the twins, they'll ask the funny question. Which one of us is the favorite twin? Adults don't talk like that. And I know now that, they're just having fun. And I keep telling them, well, you both are. That's the adult answer. But children, I'm in charge. Children, I want to be first. Children, I did better than she did, didn't I? I did better than he did, didn't I? I'm your favorite, right? If you don't play by my rules, I'm going to take my ball and I'm going to go home. I'm not going to let you play with my toys. They go off in the corner and they pound and they whine if they don't get their way. No, I'm not going to participate. Well, why aren't you going to participate? Because you're not letting me do. That's childlike communication. And in a family of adults, in a work environment of adults, in a social setting of adults, and even in a church family of adults, childlike communication has no place. Now, here's another type of communication. We've talked about the parental, we've talked about the child, but let's talk about adult communication. It occurs when the adults ask questions or they invite dialogue one with the other as they respect the right of each other to agree or disagree. Here's an illustration. How do you feel about? I thought about this or that, and I would like to hear from you about it. I would like to get your input about. Let me share with you my feelings. Can I talk to you about how this impacted me? Those are adult styles of communication. And in adult settings, that is the only acceptable form of communication. If we're going to model as adults to our children, then we must model to the children proper communication patterns. But proper communication patterns actually does not start at the church house. What we normally see in the church communication patterns are extensions of how individuals communicate in their home environment, in their social environment, in their world of work environment. That becomes their normalized habitual form of talking. And it is very difficult for individuals to shift from what is normal and habitual to something that is difficult and more challenging, i.e., coming into a church environment. In the book of John, chapter 15, verses 12 through 15, the elder John says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for a friend." Now, John is penning what Jesus said. And Jesus says, this is how I want you to handle each other. Unconditionally love one another. That's how I loved you. Talk to each other the way I talk with you. Listen to each other the way I've listened to you. And then he says, greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. He says, here's what makes for healthy relationships. Become friends with each other first. Get to know each other as friends. You are my friends if you do whatsoever I command you. You know, we talk about having best friends, good friends, and we can talk to them about anything in a non-judgmental way, and they'll correct us or they'll say to us, well, I understand why you said that, but I don't quite understand where you're coming from with that. And if those are real close friendships, have you ever had friends to say to you in a very endearing way, you've lost your last mind? Uh, did somebody bump your head? But you know they're not being demoralizing to you. They understand you and you understand them. So you have a friendship language. Henceforth, I call you not servants. See, in this servant business, we serve, but we do not see others as our servants. We see them as our friends. We see them as our peers. We see them as an adult to an adult because that's how God handled us. And because we are now clear on that, we're going to now practice what Jesus modeled. This is how he treated me. Therefore, this is how I'm going to treat God's people. As we continue to develop lessons such as these, I think it will really bless us, not only in our family dynamics or our world of work dynamics or our social interactions, but I'm convinced it's going to bless us as we prepare to reunite in the building as a congregation to fellowship one with the other. There are many things going on in the world today that warrants our attention, our prayers, and our petitions one for the other. I'm going to ask you to please bow with me in prayer at this time. Father, thank you for watching over us. I pray today that you will just guide this country, grant us wisdom, help us to learn proper communication patterns with each other. Father, for those who are still dealing with the illnesses subsequent to the COVID-19 crises, heal those that are crying out to you. Father, I pray that in your fullness of time, you will remove this pandemic from us. And I pray that even as you are working, even as you hear our prayers, that we can learn to still rejoice and we can learn to still praise you because you are God, regardless of whether the sun is shining in our lives or whether we believe that it is twilight or dark. You are always God and you are always the light of the world. Because of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Thank you so much for being a part of our midday devotional. And I just pray that you remain safe and that you just keep on moving higher and higher toward God and the glory that He has in store for each of us.
Going forward, working in the kingdom, never turning my back, just doing my part. Said I'm on my way. I've been running this long, and Lord, I need your help to be strong. Spending all my time making daily decisions, tossed between the right and wrong. There's an enemy out there seeking to devour, but I know I'm not all alone. That's where I put my trust in God. Get down on my knees, asking Him for strength to withhold. I turn it all over to God. Get back on my feet. I must continue to go. Going forward, working in God's kingdom. Just doing my part. Turn my back. I've been running long. I need your help to be strong. I have a pillar to lean on. It's not easy to knock me down. I've got my shield in one hand and my sword in the other. I'm holding fast and I'm standing my ground.